Yeah, everyone. Hello. This is another of my not necessarily full album discography rankings, more of an amendment to a video I've already released. As you may have seen, I've already released a Busta Rhymes album discography ranking. I mentioned that Busta Rhymes was planning on releasing a sequel to Extinction Level Event, which ended up at the top of that list. And in hindsight, it would have been great for 2020. I probably should have waited until the sequel album came out, and added it into the rankings in total. Just done the video then, which I very well may do at some point. But I guess now I've listened to the album, um, and I'm just going to do a little video discussing it here, and where I would imagine, where I believe its placing will be within the context of the other albums. So, so for a while, it didn't seem like the album actually was going to happen, which is why I wasn't necessarily waiting for it to happen. But lo and behold, October 30th, 2020, it did happen. And well, my initial thoughts before the actual album came out, the songs that I'd heard that had been released as singles, the Don and the Boss, or the Boss and Don, whichever round is, with Vibes Cartel, which is sort of a Jamaican dancehall track, and You with Anderson .Paak, which is also, that's how it's pronounced, I believe. That's also just neither of their best works. So I was a little bit ambiguous about what the entire album was going to be like. Thankfully, I waited to hear the entire thing, because it just goes to show that the album as a whole actually is really, really strong. Very cohesive project overall, and goes over a variety of styles in a traditional Busta Rhymes sense, in the way that the initial Extinction Level Events did. So, Extinction Level Events, The Final World Front, begins with production with Knots. It was actually left over from the initial album, which kind of helps bring us back to the feel of the original Extinction Level Event, with an intro where Busta Rhymes does his end of the world sort of speech, which was quite often a staple of the older albums, and just sort of uses his verse to kind of discuss the world that we live in at the moment in the year 2020, looking at the parallels between when the initial album came out in 1998, looking at the film Deep Impact, which heavily influenced the cover for the album, and similar disaster films since 2012. The parallels between them both having black presidents of the United States in the films, and of course, in real life, Obama would be elected president of the United States later on, and yeah, just looking at how the worlds that we're in now is still kind of apocalyptic, in the way that we've got real life viruses going around the world, systemic racism and other types of racism, the political system is just all those kind of things. Rakim also appears on the album, on this track towards the end, so it's a long intro, but it's certainly worth it because a lot is packed into it. And Rakim delivers a really, really good verse, as is sort of expected from him, as does Busta, who certainly lyrically on this album feels like he's stepping it up quite a bit since recent. Certainly using more multi-syllable rhyming and that kind of style that we don't always get from him. So, I mean, certainly with Rakim, who wants to not feel out of place. And it certainly seems like on a lot of the other tracks he goes for a similar style. So the album does kind of appear to be in some kind of segments, as it were. So like the first sort of half of the album seems to go following on from the intro, goes into more of the mid to late 90s New York style, almost going so far as boom bap in certain places. So you get more of a traditional kind of Busta Rhymes throughout it, with production again from Knotts, who is very prominent on the album, which sort of makes sense as he delivered some great tracks on the initial album, which also kind of helped introduce him as a producer to the hip hop world. So it's kind of a nice way of going back. Swiss Beats posthumously, Jay Dilla and Pete Rock unposthumously. Or deliver production regulars, DJ Scratch, DJ Premier, who I believe it's the first time Busta Rhymes has been on a DJ Premier song, Rock Wilder. So a lot of traditional late 90s, mid 90s hip hop producers appear on there. In terms of other guests, we get some an interesting collection of guests. Towards the end, Kendrick Lamar appears. So the two of them have extended verses together on the track "Look Over Your Shoulder," which is one of the highlight tracks towards the end. The Jackson 5 sample, produced by Knotts. Rick Ross appears on Master Fard Muhammad, which is a kind of luxurious Nation of Islam inspired track, where Rick Ross kind of does a lengthy Rick Ross verse and Busta Rhymes kind of follows that with a similar style verse, which kind of makes it feel more like a Rick Ross song than a Busta Rhymes song, but again, different styles throughout the album. A lot of the other guest appearances, the credited guest appearances, tend to be more from samples or background vocals, such as Czar with MOP, who again just provide background vocals to the track, which often they are quite used best as more hype men rather than actual rappers, so I guess that kind of works for them. Old Dirty Bastards is sampled from his track Brooklyn Zoo, just like Belle Biv DeVoe sampled from Poison. So again, this is all in the first half of the album, so it goes back to the older styles of tracks. Q-Tip appears on there as well. So then after that initial set of tracks, from about Master Fard Muhammad onwards, we get it kind of, the album kind of dips a bit. It gets slower, it gets less street orientating and kind of more, I suppose, the commercial Busta Rhymes, and two mixed results. Like I've said about the singles already, even though they are kind of growing on me, they're still not the strongest songs on the album. Mariah Carey appears on the track Back Where I Belong, which is basically a sequel to their initial collaboration, I Know What You Want, and everything down from the Rick Rock production, which is essentially a remix of the initial track. It just feels, I mean, I know the vocals are very subdued, as a kind of, seductive, sexy song. They're both just kind of very husky on the track, which is fine, but it never really goes above that, particularly with Mariah, who just seems to just help out with the chorus and do a little bit of whistle register right at the end of the track. Feels very underutilized, and particularly considering the fact she can still sing in this day and age. the initial "I Know What You Want" was a very seductive track as well, but she did have moments on there where she used a more powerful range, and it just felt weird that that wasn't utilized on this track. It just kind of makes it feel a bit dull. Um, Rhapsody appears as well on the song "Best I Can," which is sort of a back and forth between uh, the two of them as playing as a divorced couple, which is over a Ninth Wonder production, which makes it sound more soulful. And it's a nice concept. It does kind of lean a bit heavily in Buster's favour in the song and in the skit preceding it. But they do have moments where they showcase both sides of their arguments, so I guess it works generally. Um, Mary J. Blige appears later as well, towards right at the end, where it kind of picks up more into the soulful range of tracks. Um, she is used far better than Mariah is. I mean, she certainly uses more of her vocals on the track. Her and Buster kind of share the verses as well, which gives her more time to do things. And I mean, she does a very sort of standard Mary J. Blige appearance without being too over the top, as some Mary J. Blige songs can be. So it's nice to kind of have her in the correct range for this track, I suppose. So again, after that, you kind of get Kendrick Lamar appearing, as like I said earlier, all the way towards the end, where we get the final track, "Satanic," which again kind of leads back to the intro, just being completely devastating, satanic feeling to it, and kind of ending the album where it started, in the sense of just this is the end of the world, this is the apocalypse, and what is going to happen to change it. And finishing off with Chris Rock, who appears several times on the album. He's credited for the intro, but actually appears several times in a sort of narrator role. And yeah, all of his appearances are he's more of a hype man really than a narrator, but all of his appearances are good. He's used well enough. I just want to go back to the title track, which appears towards the beginning of the album, which features Mr. Louis Farrakhan. And I mean, whatever your opinion of Louis Farrakhan is, he has a speech at the beginning of the song, which is, a very passionate speech, but it goes on for a very long time and it's part of the song. It's not a skit or an interlude. It's actually part of the song. By the time that speech is finished, there's very little of the song left. So it kind of feels a bit of a way. It kind of feels like they should have been separate parts rather than a full track. But anyway, that's that. But it's still fine. There are moments where the songs there's like longer songs and shorter songs, particularly towards the beginning. There's a few shorter tracks which are more just Busta Rhymes going for his bars, with sort of the mixture of the old zany Busta Rhymes style, bringing some more of a growl to the delivery of a lot of his songs, which he used before, when he was being more aggressive and passionate. So it's nice to kind of hear that side of him coming back. So I say lots of different styles of Busta Rhymes appearing on this one album. There's some bonus tracks for the Reloaded edition, because of course every album these days has to be reissued with a bonus tracks a few days later. None of them particularly add anything to the album. They're all kind of just trappy bar tracks. Apart from the closer, Calm Down, with Eminem, which was released many years before the album was. And while it's not necessarily the best work of, again, either of them, it's nice to see them collaborating together, and it's good to see the track get used for something. And I mean, in terms of the bonus tracks, it's certainly the highlight. So, I think that's all I need to say about the album in total. So, in terms of its placement, it kind of it goes in the middle, I think, because it certainly goes back to the old traditional Busta Rhymes style throughout a lot of the album, but as I say, it does dip quite a bit in the middle, and it's not perhaps necessarily as cohesive as the older albums, nor is there any song on the album that necessarily stands up to the high points of Extinction Level Event's Final World Front. But still, it's an enjoyable album overall. If this was going to be a final album, which I mean is not given any indication he's going to retire anytime soon, but it would work as a send-off album, as it sort of covers a lot of Busta Rhymes' career overall, and works from that aspect. So I think it kind of has to slot, if I think it's between Anarchy and The Coming. So that would make it so at number 9, Back on the BS. Number 8, Ain't Safe No More. Number 7, Anarchy. Number 6, this album, Extinction Level Event 2. Number 5, The Coming. Number 4, When Disaster Strikes. Number 3, Genesis. Number 2, Big Bang. And number 1, Extinction Level Event, Final World Front. I feel that's probably the best place for it, and kind of fits along there just about. So it's not as I say as strong as the top albums, but it's certainly an improvement over some of the later albums. And yeah, and it kind of shows that he says he's been talking a lot in the promotion for the album about how he's spent 11 years working on this album since Back on My BS. So that means, you read between the lines, Year of the Pissing Dragon does not count as an album, so I don't have to listen to it and add it to the track list. I mean, I'm sure it's nice, and I'll probably will at some point, I just can't be asked. But anyway, so that's that. I may have to redo it at some point anyway. I may just look at all of those albums together anyway. But yeah, it's a strong album overall. It should do a lot better than it feels like it's going to do commercially at the moment, because I say he's certainly put a lot into this album to make it as strong as it can be, which I'm very happy about. But I mean, obviously he's at his stage in his career where he's not necessarily going to be able to sell like he used to. And I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to do the numbers that the initial album did. But it'd certainly be nice to see it get some good chart placements, because I think he kind of deserves it after, say, going really strong on a lot of the album. The majority of it holds up really, really well, particularly in comparison to his older projects. And yeah, I think overall it will age very well as an album as well. It may even end up going up in the rankings by 2030 or whenever. So that's that, and I'll see you for the next one, probably.